My son's quote on his Facebook status today was, "I am a feminist. And yes, I am not a woman." And that is very, very humbling to me. That is beautiful. Before I start my story, I'm going to start with a quote from Maya Angelou, who is a really remarkable woman and a great mentor to the whole world of women. And she said, "Each time a woman stands up for herself without knowing it, possibly without claiming it, she stands up for all women." And I hope that I do have a part in her saying. And I would like to share, before I also go into my story, first of all, let me acknowledge our elders on whose land we meet today, and our elders who came after them, and our elders who never saw and were part of Australia, but we are here as part of a representative. And I'm sure that it's not just me, but there are many of you who are representatives of your elders who have never been here. In our African culture, we believe that there is no death, there is a continuation of life. And I'm very sure that our ancestors are here today with us. Of course, not in a spooky way, but they do run in our, in our DNA. So let's acknowledge them and let's feel them, because some of the freedom that we are really enjoying today and celebrating is some of their hard work. I wrote a poem a long time ago, and I think it's a very good poem for an international day, and I hope you enjoy it. I called it "The Resilient Aspiring Woman." Let's hear the story of the daring woman who is here to share boldly and courageously. The woman who is tired of being a bystander all her life and whose voice has been cast aside when she puts her hand up. The woman whose stories never reached the platform of important discussions and was usually hijacked by the loudest voice. Her extraordinary story, this ordinary woman, was lost in the echo. She is now ready to be heard across nations and cultures. She has stepped into her power and is not intimidated anymore. The rock-solid message embedded in her inner alleys, in the inner alleys of her conscience, is now refreshed and vibrant as it reaches relevant platforms like this one today. This resilient, aspiring woman has stopped the war inside. If you read "resilient, aspiring woman" raw, backwards, it's war. She does not fight for equality anymore, but feels equal. She has redeemed her powerful message and shares it across all walks of life. She is back in her reigns and reminds her audience to celebrate and share the uniqueness and purity of her raw talents. Thank you. The word resilience holds immense meaning and power for me. It embodies not only my own journey, but a state that allows us to build faith in our own ability to surmount innumerable barriers and scale heights we are afraid of. I have successfully, but not without many challenges, broken through a host of barriers associated with culture, race, migration, gender, and others. In understanding the challenges that immigrants, particularly women, face in integrating and building meaningful lives in a new place, I find that I am called into a supportive role and in bridging between them and the communities in which they find themselves. I use numerous platforms as a storyteller, communicator, and nurturer to reach out to all members of my community. As a co-founder of Resilient Aspiring Women, a project started in my own backyard to connect the community and support women through storytelling, gardening, and cooking, I'm incredibly uplifted to witness what a connected community can do for all its members, despite their differences, particularly with integration. This has not always been so, though. This has been only 5 years. And my journey started in Australia 17 years back. I came as a refugee with 4 children and pregnant with my 5th child. And when I fled the war in my country, Somalia, I fled with 2 children. And I was pregnant with my 3rd child, who is today taking photos of me. Very humbling. And this was in 1991. It was a horrible war. The Somali community is actually one of the most resilient and adaptable communities I know because of our nomadic traditions. But I think they suffer an autoimmune disease, which means that when we are together against another force, we are very strong. But within ourselves, we kill each other. Because Somalia has one culture, one religion, and one language. And yet, to this day, we fight a horrible war. And that means the level of disconnect within ourselves. And coming to Australia, before I take you coming here, the war was really terrible. My husband wasn't present with me at the time, and I had to flee this war alone. I went with a boat, which of course, in the Australian standards, I don't even think it would pass on for a boat, of 150 people in it. And my sister-in-law, who is an academic, she studied biochemistry, was with me at the time. And she looked around and she said, I don't think we will make it in this boat, let's go out. And I, not an academic at all, who never used her mind and was living in a very independent communal culture, said, no, I use my intuition and I feel that I should be here. And besides, I am too tired. I will just allow what fate has to offer me. And so my sister-in-law left and I stayed in that boat. And to tell you the truth, I was one of the very lucky refugees, because when I landed in Kenya, a small town in Mombasa, I had come from that town. Even though I am a Somali, as a young child, I went to live in Kenya. So I was a Kenyan as well, and I was running away from the war to my family. But I had 149 people who had never come to Kenya and who never spoke that language. And when we reached the shores of Mombasa, they turned us around and they said, you cannot come in here. You have to go back from where you came from. I held a Kenyan passport and claimed to be a Kenyan. They said, yes, you can come in, but you know what? Leave your children behind, because they are not Kenyans. And that is what happened a long time ago. So before I came to Australia, we were displaced for 8 years. And when we were queuing up for our refugee visa, we had to wake up 3 in the morning. It was in Nairobi, one of the unsafest places in Kenya. And we had to take a bus because we could not afford a taxi, 3 in the morning, and queue up for the visa. So by the time you come here, you've done so much. So when I came, again, I was one of the very lucky refugees because I came to my family. We came through a sponsorship by my husband's brother. So our transition wasn't so hard. I think the first few months were really beautiful. They were called the honeymoon phase. I loved everything about Australia. But once I had my child, I was 6 months pregnant. Once I had the child, I had postnatal depression, which I didn't know of. And so the hardships started for me. The government resettled us in Brighton. And I call Brighton one of the whitest and very affluent area. And we were very black and very poor in it, so you can understand our predicament. To make matters worse, a few weeks into the journey, our next door neighbor knocks on the door and says, "By the way, my name is John, and I am your next door neighbor. And your children's ball has come into my court. My dogs dig, and I don't like that. Could you stop that?" And I always say that the universe has a perfect accounting system. 2 weeks later, John's ball was in our courtyard. And my children came and said, "Mom, what should we do with this?" And I said, "Well, you throw it to John." And they said, "But that's unfair. We have to go and see John's house." They were very curious. Things worked really well on our side because Mohammed was outside a few days later mowing the grass, and he decided to do a little bit of John's area. And John happened to be home that day, so he came out with 2 beers and said, "Thank you, mate." I think we were lucky because it could have gone both ways. And it took 2 unconsumed beers, because Mohammed doesn't drink, to start a neighborhood friendship. And so that was one of the stories in Brighton, not so now. And I feel that it was a very long time ago. But the story that really prompted me to understand the community and to be part of it was when my 4-year-old daughter reached the age of kinder. And we went and looked for a kinder for her, but unfortunately we went the last minute, so there wasn't anything bad said to us, but it was a very cold reception. And I felt it. I did not think, though, a 4-year-old would understand that. And she came, when we came out, she said, "Mom, did they not want me because I'm black?" And I think that statement to this day, when I utter it, it has a mark in my heart. And I felt that I had to do something about this. I was not going to wrong my children by bringing them in here and by them feeling less than others. So that's how integration started for me. And while I went in there for my children, I think what kept me on the journey was the beautiful mirror that I saw in front of me, the Western woman. You know, I looked outside in my home and I would see this woman in lycra, pushing her pram with the dog and exercising, and I thought, wow. And I could not even push a pram in the beginning. And I felt that, she intrigued me. This, blonde woman, white, beautiful makeup. And she showed me a picture that was really beautiful. And she was everywhere. She was in administration. She was the doctor I visited. She was in all places. So my curiosity overtook me. And I felt that I really wanted to know this woman. And by that time, my husband, who had come with no word of English, had done really well. He went and learned English, but not only that, he changed his career of being a vet into becoming a web designer. And he started his small business, and I was in administration, and I'd worked in administration before, and he wanted me to work with him. But again, I chose my intuition over my head, and I said, I'm actually going to work in Brighton Homes because I wanted to see the Australian woman in her natural habitat. I wanted to see how she parented. I wanted to see how she could get all this flair. And I did not have it. So I went into Brighton Homes, and afterwards I went into aged care centers, and I learned a lot over that time. And again, I was introduced into the coffee culture. And we started, stories started from that. And still, I was looking for outward to this woman. And I realized later on that amidst the glory and the beauty and everything that I saw outwardly, there was a less apparent truth. I cleaned beautiful, big Brighton homes, and sometimes I felt no one lived in them. I went to aged care centers where the wisdom of the community was supposed to be out into the community, was held in an aged care center. And I read about young children, 12 or 13, committing suicide. What did they know about life? And then I realized I wasn't here randomly. I was here to share, to remind others what they had lost of themselves, and to remember what I had lost of myself. And that was the journey that started the Resilient Aspiring Woman. And later on, I also was intrigued the way the Australian woman, ran half a marathon, and she could raise money out of that. And then I remembered the African women whom I grew among. And 3 p.m. in the morning, those women would cultivated their own land. And then they would get their produce and put them in a big basket, put it on their head, and walk like hundreds or 50 kilometers to sell their produce. And yet, they did it with such a charm, because some of them would be even crocheting along the way, or just singing, and they would have their children in the back. And that actually reminded me of our resilience. And that is when I discovered that every woman is a resilient, aspiring woman, if only we stopped the war inside us. Because to this day, I'm doing at the moment a leadership course with Women in Leadership Australia. And I'm sitting with women who are managing more than 160 employees, CEOs of companies. And yet, when we sit in that circle and each one of us is asked, what do you think? While one is talking, the other is thinking, what am I doing among these great women? I know that because we shared later on. So I think what we need to work on as women is our worthiness, our existence. We do not have to fight for anything. It's ours. We live experiences, and I am so grateful for my experiences because they have given me the contrast which says that any experience is valid as long as we are happy. We should be happy with our experiences, and as human beings, I think we are ever going forth. We always have aspirations, and we always want heights and places and faces to conquer. So I feel that the message for you that I want to leave with you today is one of love and one of trust. But not love for someone else and not trust for someone else, but the love for ourselves and the trust for ourselves. And those two words have a deep meaning for me, and I will decode. I love words, so I will decode those words for you. I asked in my meditations and in my prayer one time, I said, love is beautiful, but what is it? And what came on for me, and it might be for you, or you might want to find out what love is for you, is I was asked to listen. The first letter of love was to listen deeply. And the second was observe with no judgment. The third was validate your emotion. So whatever emotion that comes for you, if it is anger, if it is one of unworthiness, if it is one of shy, observe that anger, observe that emotion, and validate it, and feel that it's true for you. And what came for trust? The first word of trust was truth. You have to find what's true for me. And what I really discovered was that truth is dynamic, but it's also static. The truth within ourselves. There is a self-organizing power within us. Our spirit is our truth. And then there is the ego self of ourselves, which separates us, which gives us the images that we have. But in all honesty, we are one, and that's the first T of truth. The second one is resilience, the special word. So once you discover your truth, you have to remove the obstacles out of the way. So you use resilience. And the third one is unity. We have to unify. our minds, our hearts, and our physical activities. I work with Western women. She's a very organized, very hardworking, and I'm very intuitive. So I learned from them that action is important, but also being calm and connected is very important. So we are in that give and take. And S is surrender. Surrender to the force within you, and it will give you a great guidance. The last one is T, which is timelessness. And that means that we enter the dimension of forget the linear time, but the present moment. We are here together. And that means that we can do so much in that space. And it's a very beautiful space. So these are the two words that I will leave you with today. And thank you so much for listening to my speech.